Today is Love Your Neighbor Sunday. And for those, again, that are new with us, one of the things that we really do believe here at Common Good Church is that we're not just called to talk about the love of God or to preach about the love of God, but to actually show and demonstrate the love of God. And so it's partly why every fourth Sunday, or most fourth Sundays, I should say, once a month we carve out space as a community to put love into practice. And it really looks one of two ways. One is it often looks like us actually going out on a Sunday morning, partnering with different community organizations and volunteering and serving within our communities. But the other thing that we started doing, especially during the pandemic when we weren't able to do that, was we started what's called Love Your Neighbor Sunday Community Partner Conversations. And one of the things that we really do value here is this idea that we need to continue to be in a posture of both humility, but also a posture of learning and listening. And what does it look like for us as a community to continue to engage in dialogue with one another and to hear from different community leaders, different community organizations that are really on the ground, loving and serving their neighbor and our neighbor in real and tangible ways. And, you know, when we think about loving our neighbor, we think especially about the life of Jesus and the model that Jesus sets, that Jesus was always the one who would go to those who are overseen and overlooked and forgotten, the least and the last, the marginalized and the oppressed. And so what does it look like for us to be a community that has the heart of Jesus? And so one of the ways that we get to continue that posture of listening and learning is by bringing in folks from the community again who could share with us. And so that's really what's happening today. We're having one of those Love Your Neighbor Sunday community partner conversations. And I'm so pumped to have one of my good friends, Tyreef, in the building with us. And before Tyreef comes up, I just want to just share a quick little bio. Maybe you caught it on the website or on the email. But Ty currently serves as a membership director at Bellevue Family YMCA. Shout out to the YMCA. And is also an Eastside Community Accountability Board member at Partnership for Youth Justice, King County Superior Court, and is also part of the Leadership Eastside class of 2024, which means you're graduating soon. Ty is also a husband, father, mentor, coach, a youth mental health advocate, and he's a respected community leader with 20 plus years of experience mentoring and engaging with youth, especially BIPOC youth in the community, young adults in various settings. He also served with King County Department of Adult and Juvenile Detention for 11 plus years and worked multiple roles, including State of Washington Field Training Officer, certified through the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission. So all that to say, Ty is an incredible human being and has done, yes, let's give it up for Ty, has done and continues to do so much for the community. And so we're so honored and thrilled and grateful to have Ty with us. So without further ado, can we give a warm welcome for Ty as he comes on up? And Ty, you can make your way to yellow. So thank you again for being here. So appreciate you. And I know you got a lot of fans in the building and online. So it's so awesome. I think it's so reflective of just who you are. And I think, just really briefly, I think, you know, we haven't actually known each other for that long. I think it's been a couple years. I think we got connected initially through the Y, actually, right? Because we started bringing our family in it's always weird to say post-pandemic. You know, coming out of pandemic, and immediately we connected. You were just so gracious and hospitable. And just loved the ways in which you were interacting with the youth and the community and creating space. You know, we talk a lot about this, like this idea of creating space, especially for youth to gather. And so it's just been so evident in just the short time that we've known each other. So again, this is truly an honor and a privilege to have you here.
Thank you, Royce. Good morning, Good Common Church.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm definitely stepping out of my comfort zone. But I'm blessed to be here. Appreciate the invitation. It's kind of funny because I had a few people tell me to be cautious of what I shared in fear of blocking future opportunities, right? Closing doors. I took a step back, and I'm not here for that. You know, I wanted to share my story in hopes of saving a life. sometimes people see leaders in the community or all of us, and don't know the behind the scenes story of what it took. And so thank you for having me, and yeah.
I love it. Well, let's start there. Because again, I think what has been so inspiring about just being around you is getting to hear your story and your journey, right? So much of the work that you do, I think, has been informed by just your own experiences. And so maybe we could start there. Just share, and you've been really open and transparent with me, and I know that's something that you feel is part of your calling, right? Is just to share your story openly. So, I think we would all be blessed to just hear some of that. And I know it's hard to sometimes consolidate your life story into a few moments or a few minutes, but whatever you feel in your heart that you would want to share just in terms of your own testimony and story, that'd be awesome.
Yes. So I was born and raised in San Diego, California. San Diego is a beautiful city, but the community I grew up in, the colors you wore mattered. Wear the wrong colors, you would get killed, cost you your life. I experienced a lot of trauma and death by the age of 10, cousins, relatives, just because you wore the wrong colors, wrong hat. With that said, in our community, the only way out was to be a professional athlete or entertainer. And so the goal was to earn a full scholarship in whatever sport you chose. Also, in my community, we were never taught that our vote counted, that it mattered. So, just moving forward, a lot of barriers, but I was blessed to earn a full track scholarship to the University of Washington. It was, I can't explain that day, that Wednesday, when Coach Ed Turner called me and had that offer available for me. So within 3 days, Friday, I bought a car. I was working that summer, did not know what to do. My cousin was just murdered like a few months earlier, and there was just no opportunities at the time for me, I felt. Also, I was 18, and where I grew up, it's pretty difficult to have two grown men under the same household, right? There's a lot of conflict of interest, and just want to do something with my life. So my dad jumped in the car with me on that Saturday morning, last minute, which I was thankful because I thought I was going to Washington, D.C., I had no idea what the Pacific Northwest was. I knew nothing about, at the time, this was really country for me, right? So that 21-hour drive, so much going through my head, I've never seen so many white people in my life. No disrespect, but, I remember getting gas in Oregon, and people were yelling at me because I was pumping my own gas. I didn't understand that it was illegal in Portland or the state of Oregon at that time that you're not allowed to pump your gas. So we arrived to Seattle. My dad, he gave me like 40-something bucks, took him to SeaTac Airport, and he said, "You're a man now, good luck." And, I'm going to get to this later, but no one ever talked about or taught me how to process emotions. I was just, what's the next step? Because I wasn't even enrolled in school. What helped though, because I had a good GPA. Of course, I had good numbers down at Mount Miguel High School. My buddy from high school's here, so it's good seeing him. But school started. Crashed my classes that first week. It was all white, it was all Asian. I just remember it was cold, it was like 40 degrees, and everyone walked around in t-shirts, shorts, flip-flops, it was raining. So talk about culture shock, right? And then when I did see people that looked like me, I would say hi, and their head went down. So I guess we call it the Seattle freeze today, right? And wow, so moving forward, I remember Kane Hall, one of my classes was called Social Problems 270. Al Black was a black professor, and that's where I ran into a lot of athletes, a lot of students that looked like me. Most of them were from California, right? And I recall sitting in this 500-plus classroom, hearing Al Black talk about issues that we grew up with. And so I was like, why are these students paying all this damn money, sorry for my language, to talk about gang violence, drug use, prostitution. So I did not adjust well to Seattle, the weather. I competed every day. It was a goal for me to make sure I graduated, which I did. So moving forward, I did this internship at King County Juvenile Detention where I just watched youth that were in prison, right, or going through court process. And that was the first time I felt that I could connect with someone that was not a student athlete. They were kids that were me. They were my cousins, my family. And what I learned during the internship was these kids didn't have any role models. You know, they were told that they're criminals and they're no good. And that's when I kind of understood labeling theory, right? Like, if you're labeled something as being bad, eventually you're going to be bad, right? So after my internship, I continued to work with those youth as a volunteer because it was also kind of like my safe space, right? And that's when, you know, I didn't understand at the time, but those youth were able to connect with me. Moving forward to why, I still see youth today that I've met 20 years ago. Still have conversations and make sure they're sailing the right path. I had an extra year of a full scholarship at UW, but you know, it was time for me to go home and graduated early. And about 8 days from moving back, that's when I learned I had a baby girl on the way. 22 years old, learning you have a kid, you know, no one prepares you for that. Another step in my journey. Also, you know, to let my mom know that, hey, I'm not coming home. You're about to be a grandma, and mom's a white woman that's Mormon. None of that went over well. Tyra was born. She just turned 21 September 15th, so I've been a dad for 21 years. But my life started, you know, because I needed a job now. I started working at King County Juvenile Detention. Within like 4 years, you know, I was a field training officer, backfield sergeant. I specialized with the gangs. You know, I learned a lot, but I was able to connect with the youth, and they trusted me, which meant I was a trusted adult. So living that American dream, you have a kid, you have a job, you have to get married. So eventually I did get married in 2006, and I'm going through with life. Moving forward to 2008, my partner at the time and I were expecting a child, and you know, this is what life is: a husband, job, raising kids. I also took in her son, James Johnson. He was 2.5. And still in my life, still love him as my son. But I remember on a Friday, my partner called and said that, you know, we have a problem. Something's wrong with the baby. My ex-wife was 35 plus, and so women that are 35 plus, there's a lot of complications during pregnancy, right? You're high risk. So we were just informed that our daughter wasn't going to make it, and she was going to be a stillborn. I didn't know what that was. I remember I was doing something at work. You know, I couldn't ask no one because I didn't really share my personal life. When you work in a correctional environment, you have to stay tight-knit because eyes are on you 24/7. I didn't even trust the officers and my peers I worked with. So Monday, right over Lake, and just stale. I mean, I can't explain. It was just stale. So we prepared for birth. We started to go through the process. The same thing I experienced with Tyra, expecting a lifeless body. But as my partner pushed, you know, you hear someone crying. And I remember looking at my ex-wife, and I was just shocked and confused. And we named our daughter Faith, but she was born alive. No one prepared us for this. And I just remember my ex-wife looking over, asking me, what's going on? They tried to hand Faith over. She refused. So here I am with this little girl. I had so much going through my head. But make a long story short, you know, I watched, she struggled breathing, and she faded. No one, you know, the staff left. I remember my mother-in-law at the time came in, and she took Faith, and just stuck. Priest came, I think a mental health specialist, social worker came. You know, we just want to get out, like, what just happened? I remember that night, I called my mom, and it's like, hey, I think I'm struggling with something. And she said, Right now, you're a husband. Think about your wife. She carried Faith for 8 months, and she was right. So the culture I grew up in, when you celebrate, when something bad happens, you have a stressful day, go grab a drink, right? And so my vice was drinking. That's what I coped with. I coped with alcohol. And during that time, you know, I guess people call it depression today. I started my relationship with alcohol, not realizing the long-term effects. You know, eventually my drinking led to our divorce. In a process, we did have another baby girl named Amaya. She's 14 at Bellevue High School. Love you, baby girl. But I'm still processing. No one talked about mental health. No one talked about how we manage our emotions. Where I grew up, crying, showing any kind of emotion is a sign of weakness. I've seen it in my community. I see it today. I see it in the Asian community today right now with youth I work with, right? But that's backfiring to you guys right now. It's truly backfiring. So 2009 I was officially divorced. You know, I was fortunate to buy another home in Bothell. Again, I didn't see no one that looked like me, you know, and I think I was like pulled over 17 times, documented within like 18 months, because King County was involved with my situation. But my chain of command, my superiors, and my friends kept saying like, hey, Ty, you're drinking too much, right? And I said, I bought a house, you know, I have a great job, making decent money, I have a couple of cars. You're just a hater, right? You can't tell me nothing. About 2012. So 3 years, you guys, that lifestyle led me to a situation where I was facing 8 to 10 years in prison, multiple felonies. No one prepared me for that. You know, your life can change in a blink of an eye. One night, one drink, for me, can change your life. So again, you know, friends dropped. I was fortunate, some information came out where I wasn't terminated, because initially I was forced to resign after 10 plus years with King County, but I was placed on paid administrative leave. And you think that's a vacation, right? But when you're drinking to cope, you can't eat, you have no one to talk to, the shame from the incident, right? And I was spiritually, I was mentally and physically dying. I didn't even know it. I think within 3 months, staying in bed, not knowing what to do, where to get help, you know, I lost about like 40 pounds. Went through the process, and thankfully, I was not convicted of felonies, right? I was given an opportunity to return to King County, but I continued to drink, I continued to cope. So I celebrated with alcohol, right? Eventually, my drinking, lost my house. Being a dad, that's my life. And I didn't have the opportunity to not just wake up to see my kids every day, but they were gone, right? And I began to sleep out of my truck, which got comfortable real quick, really, really quick. And started getting in trouble with the law, more fights. And then, 2014, I did not know Seattle had train tracks downtown. I was walking in the middle of the night, found a little space, and I slept. And it was the first time I slept outside. I remember just curling up. Alcohol kept me warm because I had my bottle, like it was my girlfriend or something. But and I woke up and was like, you know, that wasn't that bad. You know, saying this right now, when we look at our homeless community right now, it's not something that happens overnight. You know, it's a process. And I didn't realize I was getting comfortable with that mentally. So I had a friend that ran into me, and I thought I was, you know, I'm good. And she said, Ty, what the hell? Where have you been? So I remember her taking me to her home to take a shower, and that's when I looked in the mirror and didn't even recognize myself. So time went on. My mom finally said it was time to come home. I still owned my home in Baltimore at the time. I eventually did lose it. And I remember getting home, telling mom, like, hey, I need church. I need Jesus back in my life. This whole time she was praying for me, but my mind just wasn't present, right? And in the past, when I come home, I'm like a celebrated neighborhood hero, right? I got out the hood, I had a full ride, I had a great job, I was parenting and present. And no matter how late I was or what I was doing with my friends, you're getting up at 8 in the morning and your butt's gonna be in church. Well, that was the first time my mom said, son, stay home, rest. And I'm thinking, no, I actually need to go to church. And my mom was ashamed of me. That's how I felt. Never said it, but that's just how I felt. So a couple months, another friend, like all my friends were deceased, still hanging out on the corner drinking Mad Dog 4040. I mean, it was just Mad Dog 2020, you're right. Double fist, right? 4040. 40 so. Old English. Yes. So this wasn't me, and I had a friend that was willing to help me, and so I moved back to Seattle. I realized my family, they were there for me, they were praying, but I had to figure this out. And so I accepted I had a problem, and that's when my first sober journey began, but eventually I'm gonna get to that. There's a difference between sober and living a sober lifestyle versus going dry, right? And you're doing it for others. I wasn't really doing it for myself. I was just doing it to my mom, number one, my sisters, which I love them so much, and my kids. So couldn't get a job because I was charged with felonies, but I wasn't convicted, and I learned that many employers, when they see, you're charged with a serious crime, they're gonna give you opportunity, right? So I started training clients under the table, and Jill was my first client, and she just needed to lose weight for her wedding. And make a long story short, we surpassed her goals within like 3 months, and we started 6 weeks ago, and she looks amazing. I spoke with her yesterday, and it was just, that gave me confidence that I can be someone, I still can do something, and I learned that by helping others. So during that time, I got a little cash now, and I was out in Bellevue. In 2015, I met my wife, just so randomly downtown, and when I laid my eyes on her, I knew I had nothing to offer her because I'm living in this garage with the biggest spiders. It didn't smell good. I was grateful to have a roof, right? But after I met you, and I know we talked about this, but I went back and slept in my car again. I was kind of almost resorting to my old ways, and drinking, I was struggling with that. I stayed sober, picked up more clients, and this is when I met the man named Dan Levitin. This is the man that saved my life. This man's my mentor today. I consider him family, and I love this guy. But moving forward, I tracked down Crystal, and I went the friend approach, and became great friends. It's not a such thing as a perfect relationship, but she was worth fighting for. Most people, when I had money, I had a house, I was surrounded by so many people, right? But when I lost everything, Crystal didn't care. Still can't explain it today, man. So going through life, my mentor, Dan, was like, hey, why are you training? There is so much more to you. And I was trying to tell him, hey, I used to be someone, right? I used to work with youth. I was almost a poster child for King County Youth Department. And so after 6 years of not working from King County, I finally started working at Seattle Children's Hospital. Did a year out there, and talk about culture shock, right? So when you're out the workforce for 6 years, where at least 4 of those years I isolated myself, right? The world changed. My first conversation with these young adults were, you're not queer. And I thought those were fighting words. Like, what do you mean? And I was being teased. Being a straight male was not just being a black man in that work environment, but just being straight. I was a minority, and I didn't understand LGBTQ. I mean, just the world changed, and I didn't really function well because I'm still used to that King County environment, and not to mention living on the streets and trying to work or live in survival mode. Eventually, I relapsed. Remember, I just got 2 years, and I was kind of like, haha, I told everyone I could do it. But again, I wasn't living sober. I was just trying to prove a point to others. Relapses are deadly, you guys, because when you get sober or you stop drinking, you don't start over. It's a disease. And not only did I pick up where I left off, I had a higher tolerance. I am considered a third stage alcoholic, meaning with my BAC, my blood alcohol content drops below 0.2, I would have seizures. So I had to maintain alcohol in my system to function. I went from a functional alcoholic for about 10 years, successful, to dysfunction real quick. Because of my drinking dysfunction, you start pushing people away that you love. And again, start pushing the kids away. Crystal was so stubborn, right? But I was just done. Then we had the night, pretty much changed my life, where I pushed her away because, again, my weight was dropping, I wasn't eating, I needed alcohol just to put my clothes on, if I was able to do that, right? So I packed my bags and I called Dan and said, I need your help. A lot of times when people struggle with addiction, it's not just the person that's abusing, but all your loved ones suffer too. That's why they call it like a family disease. So Dan thought I was just a great person, didn't realize I struggled with alcoholism. A lot of people didn't know. I hid it pretty well. Although I was smiling on the outside, I had so much pain inside, and I didn't understand mental health. I didn't want to show emotions. I didn't want to be weak because so many people relied on me. So that night, Dan sent me an Uber to his house, and he was kind of like, what the hell? And I said, I tried to tell you I had a problem with drinking. Crystal and I broke up. And so he told me, I'm going to let you stay here tonight. I'm going to get you a hotel, but you have 1 week to find help. And he recommended that I find someone that I could connect with. Let's find you a black therapist. Let's find you someone that understands, because I don't understand what's going on. So Dan got me this hotel downtown Seattle, not understanding the problem I had with drinking. The hotel had a full bar downstairs, and I was 2 blocks away from Bartell's. It was kind of my go-to, get that $6 cheap bottle of vodka. But I wanted to try, because this man, I knew he loved me, and my word means something to me. When you say something like, you have to at least try. I remember getting hold of this therapist in Madison Park, black male, and I told him about what's going on, a little bit about my history, and I had a glimpse of hope. And I remember he was silent, and he said, wow, you have a lot going on. And I said, yes. Can you help me? And he said, unfortunately, I can't help till after Christmas. And this was like October 6th, October 7th. And my only outlet was suicide. I mean, I struggled with suicide in the past. And if you know anything about that act, females attempt it more often than males, but males have a higher success rate, right? I already had 2 attempts when I was going through that process when I was facing time, 8 to 10 years. But clearly God had another plan, right? So when I could not get help, I remember texting Dan, and he said, well, keep trying. And I felt, you don't get it. I went to Bartell's. I bought a couple of bottles. I remember it was Monday Night Football, and I coped. I remember I ended up in Fremont somehow. Couldn't tell you how I got out there. But I called Crystal, and I was empty more than I've ever been in my life. But I wanted to see her to say goodbye. The hotel that Dan put me in had this bathroom. It was like on the 4th or 5th floor, but the window was open. There was no screen, and it was a really big window in this bathroom, and below was just an alley. And so I already knew what the plan was for me. And I thought about where I went wrong in my first 2 attempts at suicide. So, finished 1 bottle. If you know anything about alcoholism, you tend to hide bottles because you want to hide your secret, right? And I remember I wanted to hide it just in case housekeeping came and took it. Crystal came down and looked at her one last time, but she wasn't aware of what I was about to do, you know? Walked her to the car. I kept thinking, should I write a note? I was thinking about my kids. Part of me was thinking I will see Faith again. But, you know, I grew up in the church, you guys, you know, and suicide is kind of like this act that it's not just frowned upon, but you just don't do that. So I recall going up the elevator. I had my hood on. I was trying to figure out in my head, where did I hide this bottle? And I decided I'm just going to jump out. Because, again, I already sized that window up. Elevator open, and God, I still to this day can't explain what happened. But when I came to, the hotel door was right in front of me. I was surrounded by SPD, fire department, medics. Somehow, I mean, God is real, you guys. I remember SPD kept asking, "What's your name?" You know, I recall someone saying that the room's registered to Dan Leviton, and I was like, "Guys, my room's right there. Let me go." Like, so of course I was rushed to the hospital. You know, I had a .4 something BAC, which was normal. I was functioning fine. We got a hold of Dan, and again, I did not want to face him, but I just needed help, and I think that's when I surrendered. I still don't know what stopped me from getting into that room. So Dan is a man of Jewish faith. I just recall him showing up. He had his hat on, he had a cross, and he was singing, you know. But that man loved me. And then we talk about the power of prayer, you know. This guy is so humble. I'm so grateful for him. But I remember the counselor kept saying, Ty's going through a lot of stuff. He has so many different roles. He'll be fine. And Crystal kept saying, like, no, you don't understand. Even Dan, he was borderline convinced that I did not need help, you know. But my only option was, and I never said this publicly, but I checked into inpatient treatment. I am a Lakeside Milam graduate. The test for me, though, was I couldn't do it for other people. I had to do it for myself. And it was smart, but, you know, I could have took that cab and went to the bar. You know, I had like 20-something bucks, I remember I found out of nowhere. I thought about even getting the shot before I went in, and I was like, you know, no, this is it. And I could hear my girl screaming in the back of my head, missing me. So I checked in, and treatment is when I first learned that we need to love ourselves. This whole time, like, I knew how to love, or I thought I knew how to love other people, but I never knew how to love myself. Almost done. Unfortunate truth, when you go to treatment, you know, they don't tell you, but less than 10% of people survive or maintain their sobriety. Friends that I've connected with, Team Brown, Kenny, he was from Southeast San Diego, and he grew up from Four Corners of Death. To see another black male struggle with alcohol and actually relate in the community that we grew up in, I had a buddy to do this with, right? Unfortunately, like most people that go to treatment, he's not here today. Alcoholism, addictions take so many lives, you guys. And it was additional motivation to keep going one day at a time. And so with that approach, graduated. AA never worked for me. You know, AA is it's a 12-step program for Alcoholics Anonymous, or NA, but because it didn't work for me in the past, I started tapping into my faith. I still question, like, how come I didn't get in that room, right? But God clearly had another plan for me.
Yeah, amen.
Clearly, right?
Yeah.
So one day at a time, and when October 9th, I'll have 4 years clean, consecutive. Was able to rebuild my family. I'm a happily married man. My son, Titus, he's calm right now, but so many blessings. We're buying another home. I have a career that I enjoy, and this is my way of giving back. And so you see me smiling. When I see a father coming up to his kids playing basketball, or when you see someone that needs help, I know what it feels like when help is not available. And I feel this is my purpose. So thank you.
I love that. Let's give it up for Ty. Thank you so much for just sharing, and thank you so much for sharing that. And what a testimony. We were talking about this earlier this morning before we got up here, but oftentimes I think many of us can bear witness to this, right? But oftentimes God has the ability to transform our pain into our purpose, right? And I think so much of that's your story. Like, our trauma can become part of our testimony. And so I love that about you, that so much of what you have gone through, by the grace of God, right, you're still here, but you have recognized and seen that as God's invitation to you to say, okay, this is what you went through. How can you show up, and how can you love on youth in the ways in which you experience that love to help others, right? And so maybe just talk about some of the different things that you're doing now in terms of youth mental health advocacy, the work that you're still doing within criminal justice work, and maybe we can touch on the why in a little bit. But yeah, what are some of the things as now you have kind of discovered this purpose for your life? What are some of the ways that you're living into that?
Yes, I've been able to identify that there's a lack of mentors in our communities, right? When you talk about mental health, we don't talk about it, right? There's a negative stigma around mental health. I remember working with youth that had mental health issues. We classified them as crazy, right? Unstable. Part of Leadership Eastside, and thank you, Peyton and Linda, for being here, for your support. Our goal is to identify a problem in the community, right? Our campaign team, which is 8 of us, Peyton is part of the same team, we see a social service gap with BIPOC youth on the east side. There are services out there, right? But that traditional one-on-one, and I think it's like 84% white female, these kids cannot connect with these therapies or services that are out there, right? Our campaign team, we've been interviewing different providers, large scope, and working with the courts, for example. Partnership for Youth Justice is a program where if a youth gets in trouble for the first time, instead of locking them up, let's be proactive, figure out what the problem is. Because once you get caught up in the system, it's a revolving door, and it's hard to get out. I've learned with my time with King County that we need to be more preventive. And so I had this young lady, 15 years old. She was a cutter, struggled with suicide. I mean, she had a lot going on, right? Family split. And then within time, the services were just checking boxes. She wasn't getting the help. Also, she was calling me or texting me like 11, 12 o'clock at night, and with the court system and how laws are set up, that puts me at risk. But what I learned with her was I was a trusted adult that she could talk to. So I invested more time with her, and eventually found this API, Asian Pacific Islander mental health service, right? This young lady just graduated. I know she's in college in the area somewhere, but what that tells me is a lot of mental health providers in our community right now, they're just checking boxes. They're not actually providing help, and our campaign, we're just trying to figure out a way to make the process so much easier for our youth and children, right? Again, I was ready to end my life because I need help in the moment right now, and I was told 4 months. And I'm an adult with a lot of experience, a lot of training. I'm a dad. So imagine what these kids are going through right now, right? And so that's my motivation, man. And I hear success stories all the time, and that keeps me pushing. We don't want to talk about the why right now, but our goal with LE, we're not going to fix the problem, right? But we are going to bring awareness to mental health. The stigma around it, we got to start talking about it, because our kids are unable to connect. And if you don't connect, they're going to isolate and rot, and the consequences are not healthy, not good.
So what are you seeing? I know a lot of the work that you're doing right now is here in Bellevue, right? I think a lot of people, when they think about Bellevue, they think about affluence, they think about wealth, they think about educate, all these things that it seems like it's such a well-resourced city. I think a lot of people don't think about the needs, right? And the struggles that many of our youth, especially youth of color, face on the east side here in Bellevue. But you get to see that and interact and engage with that on a regular basis. What are some of like the needs and the gaps that you're seeing right now with the youth here in Bellevue?
And yeah, I do want to confirm, Bellevue, there's a stereotype that, Bellevue, there's no issues out here, right? Bellevue is perfect along with most east side cities. As a black male working on the east side, I have a lot of black leaders in South King County or other areas asking, Ty, why in Bellevue? The help and need is here. But what's forgotten about that, we are out here. I work with black and brown Asian youth every day. And again, the BIPOC community in the east side is forgotten about. It's almost like it's swept under the rug. I'm also learning with a lot of east side cities that the city pushed the problems on the outskirts. So you will hear, for example, Bellevue does not have a homeless problem. There's not a drug problem. I used to hear people say that, and so I started inviting people to the YMCA. Remember our parking lot? We had RVs. I mean, things were just stacking up. And so our goal, especially with the Y, it's addressing the issue, bringing attention to our leaders in the community, but also what services can we provide? As a YMCA membership director, somehow I do wear his hat of a social service worker, but so many families come in weekly needing help with food, rent, water shut off for a week. I have this private business, but can't afford to sell, right? With school, a lot of BIPOC students, they're here from other areas. Where a lot of us are transplants, right? And so they're unable to connect with teachers. Teachers don't understand their behavior. The social services counselors that are on campus, they're not connecting. I think also with the pandemic, I used to think students went back 2 years, but throughout our campaign, we learned that students actually went back 3 years socially, right? One, and things won't tap out in the school district until like 2030. And that traditional one-on-one counseling, therapists, it's not working, right? And so families out here need more support, and we're just working on it, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and speaking of the Y, again, membership director, right, by title, but you do so much more than that at the Y. And we've talked about this, where the Y really is one of the very few. Like we were trying to name, like what are the spaces for, especially youth of color, to go to, and to be in community and to feel safe. And I don't know, it's interesting because you go through Bellevue and you don't necessarily see a lot of, I guess, depending on which neighborhoods, right, perhaps that you're in, but like when you go to the Y, like you said, right, like it's such a diverse space, right? And Talk about some of, well, actually, let's do this, because we found some photos of like you in action. So maybe we thought we'd talk about the why that way. But can we just maybe put up a photo? Okay, so there you are, right there, right? Ty, Healthy Kids Day. Talk about that. And that's MD right there? I can't believe you know Medeiros.
Yeah,
Medeiros, y'all remember Medeiros? Used to play sax for the church.
Yeah, it's my little brother.
What is this right here? Healthy Kids Day. What are y'all doing here?
So Healthy Kids Day. Again, Bellevue is so much more diverse as far as people, religion, sex, color of our skin. So Healthy Kids Day, our goal was to provide a safe space for all, a welcoming space. I heard stories over the past 3 years where they go to other establishments in Bellevue and no one feels comfortable, right? People just don't look like them. I mean, I don't know. I never worked in Bellevue prior to the pandemic, but with Healthy Kids Day, we were really intentional of partnering with community, nonprofit organizations, and just providing a safe space for all. I reached out to a couple of my friends, and we had 500 plus families, you guys. I remember Councilwoman Janice Zahn, she stopped by. Amazing woman, you guys, amazing.
I think we have a photo of that with you.
Yeah. But she mentioned, she was like, wow, Ty, it looks like United Nations in here, right? And I say, that's the purpose, because we are a safe space. Yeah. And I hear all the time that families have nowhere else to go. So we're like a second home for many. And I've learned to, I hire from our community, and so just building that community. So Healthy Kids Day, great event, great time. It's every year in April, so if you haven't been to one, stop by.
That's awesome. There we go. That's what you doing some coaching, working with some of the youth that come through the Y.
Yes. So Royce, when you and I connect, and when I see fathers coming in with their children, daughters, sons, I have a special appreciation for that because there are so many youth that do come in without a male figure, without a role model, without a parent. Not saying these kids do not have that, but these kids keep me going, right? When you think of Bellevue, you don't think you'll see a group of black and brown youth playing ball, smiling, having a good time. Again, I'm a membership director, but I make sure these guys are doing well in school. Do they need help? And because I'm a trusted adult for them, and I'm able to relate and connect, we go through some things. But yeah, that's my rep right there. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. What's this one? Is that council member Zahn right there?
Yes, that's Mrs. Zahn. So this is Healthy Kids Day. This past year, we were fortunate to have the University of Washington football team. I believe this is the lineman, right? I'm about 6 feet, 220, so you can kind of get a good sense how big these guys are. But yeah, the kids, the energy in that gym, the way the student athletes interacted. I mean, I don't know if anyone was there this year, but Liz, you could attest to this. Peyton, you were there with your family. It was love. I mean, and so, yeah, it's just something that we wanted to bring to the community that maybe they wouldn't have any other opportunity to do so, right?
Love it. Shout out to Desfit right there too.
Yeah, so Desiree Johnson, yes, she's our family programs and youth sports director, and she's changing the game for us right now. But we can talk more about that what the Y is doing.
Yeah, and she's been working with my daughter too, which has been awesome. So.
She's been an asset to our team.
Yeah, love it. What's the next photo? Healthy Kids Day again.
Officer Craig.
Officer Craig.
With my story, and Officer Craig, especially on the east side, a lot of my friends and peers, we don't come out here because of the police. It's funny, I hear today when the police or badges around, people feel safe. No, that's not the case. Up in Snohomish County, when a patrol car gets behind me, I still have a physical reaction based off my experiences, right? And so when I met Officer Craig about 2 years ago, and I had a negative mindset towards him still. It wasn't because of the man, but the badge. and my experience with Bellevue Police Department. But Craig is awesome. You know, Craig, and I think like next month he's providing a free workshop for women, self-defense, for free. You know, just to help give the skills that women need, because there's a lot of things going on the streets. So Officer Craig and I, you know, we talked, and he came down for Healthy Kids Day, and he gave a free clinic for youth and families, and those guys were rolling around those mats. I mean, I didn't know he had skills like that, right? Still want to test your hands, Craig, but yeah, he's an amazing community, not just partner, but officer. And we talked about community connections, right, where everyone in that room gave him his praises. So,
yeah, when we had our neighborhood block party last summer, he was out just hanging out and being with the kids. So, absolutely. Do we have a few more? Tell us about this.
Black Lives Matter. So, I want to give credit to Heather Siegel. She's the woman that gave me this opportunity at Bellevue. Strong community advocate, so passionate. But the story, this is Mia. She's the artist. Her and her family are from Italy. And when we had the riots in 2020 in Kirkland, her family put this mural together. And this is the one that was downtown on 85th, off Lake Washington Boulevard. After a week, you know, because with most I don't want to say trends, but when you bring awareness to a situation, everyone wants to jump in, but then hurry jump out. So Mia had a hard time finding a home for this beautiful artwork, which kind of mimics which was created in Capitol Hill. So Heather and Mia worked together, and I remember they brought this. It's huge, right? And we wanted to make it visible for our community. And in the pushback from not just our members, the emails, I mean, I want to talk to Ty, you know, it was a lot, you guys. But, you know, in return, black families felt welcomed. You know, just to look on black family faces when we have youth sports, and they still see the sign. The sign was put up in September 2020. Not one time was it vandalized. Not once. We didn't think it was going to last a week, right? Which shows the respect the community did have for our space. So it's still standing. I know there's different views on this, but you know, it sends a message about, you know, the systematic racism we do deal with every day. It's still present, so it's still standing.
I love that. I think we have one more picture. I found this in an article, a news article. That's you right there on the left. Tell us about when this was happening. They called you, I think on the little subheading, it was like Tyriff Rudder from Bellevue YMCA.
Yeah, that was unexpected. So with the YMCA, you know, we want to be supportive and create a community that, you know, we love and support each other. When Stop Asian Hate was going on, and you had a lot of black adults attacking senior Asian people down in California, and it was happening all over, right? And my boss, Heather, you know, I could see the pain that she was processing, dealing with. And yes, it had nothing to do with Black Lives Matter, right? But as a community, we need to support each other. And so I remember Ron, he was one of my leads on my team, and I said, I know this is not a part of your job description, but we need to be here for Heather. And we need to be here for our Asian community. Because we do serve a lot of Asian members right now, right? And so Ron and I, we drove to Cold Creek. It was actually the first time I've ever been to Cold Creek. And I remember it was a QFC or a Safeway. We found some old boxes. Good thing Ron was a better writer, drawer than me. And we went to support. And there was some pushback privately on my end, like, what are you doing out there? But at the end of the day, you know, we're here to support community, and the color of our skin should not dictate who we support or not.
I love that. And I think it's the reminder of what does it look like for us to be, as your sign says, Black and Asian solidarity. What does it look like, especially for communities of color, to show up for other communities of color, right? Rather than staying in our silos, but acknowledging, right, the systemic issues and systemic racism that we all experience, and what does it look like to come alongside of each other in that work together. So Hey, I know we're running out of time. Let's end with this one last question. I know faith is such a big part of your journey. It's part of the reason why you're here with us today. And but talk about this. We call this Love Your Neighbor Sunday. And again, the hope is that we're proactively loving neighbor, but we're also learning, listening, expanding our understanding and imagination of what it means to take God's invitation to love our neighbors seriously. And so what would be your word to a church like ours and to those that are watching here in the building and those online? What does loving neighbor mean to you, and what do you think that looks like for the church in particular, those of us who subscribe to the faith and say we're followers of Jesus? What's your understanding or interpretation, or maybe parting words for us?
So along my journey, I didn't know how to love myself, right? And I do want to say, love is just not a feeling, right? Love is also an action. I want to say that again. Love is just not something we feel. It's also an action. Love without action is pretty hollow, right? And so if you say you love your partner, you love your kids, you love your church, you love your community, what are your actions? What are you doing? I mean, I see a lot of people talk and say, I do this and that, but there's no actions to back it up. And so I'm learning self-love, self-care every day. And so I have the capacity to love others and not just say it, but express that through my actions. And so for the church, if you love your church, if you love God, and if you love your community, cool, but what are you doing?
I feel like Ty should drop the mic right there. Mic drop. Mic drop. I love that. My phone just died. I was trying to see what time it was. 11:26. Fantastic. We have a few minutes. So here's what we're going to put Ty on the spot, do a little Q&A. I'm just messing. We're not doing that. But here's what we want to encourage. This is not just a conversation for the two of us to have, but this is really a conversation for our community to have and so to have together. And so we've got two questions. Maybe turn to, just for a few minutes, turn to a neighbor, maybe groups of 2 or 3, and maybe pick one of these questions. So the first one's just a super generic one. Is there something that Ty shared today that stood out to you? Maybe a particular insight, key takeaway, conviction, and encouragement, or even a question that has come up from what Ty has shared. That's one question that you can use as a kind of discussion point. The second, we talked about this earlier, Ty's story reminds us that God can transform, right, pain into our purpose, and can transform even trauma and make that a part of our testimony, which I think is so much of your story. So take a moment to reflect on your own journey, your own lived experiences, and how might your experiences shape and inform the ways in which you are showing up and loving your neighbors in your community today. Okay, so those are 2 question prompts. Again, let's use this as a space to dialogue, because I think more so than just listening, right, the hope is that this would turn into action. How does Ty's story inspire us to consider the ways in which God might be inviting us to roll up our sleeves, lace up our boots, and to put our love and faith into action? So, sound good? So take a few moments to do that, and hopefully you'll have some great conversation, and then in a few moments I'll kind of officially wrap us up. Those that need to pick up your kids can, but maybe put on some music and maybe turn on some lights as well. Okay? So use those questions as a prompt. So thank you so much for being here. I mean, this was the first time that you, have you done this before? Bro, man. One, I want to know based on, because you're just so, you're so good at articulating. Man. This is my truth? Yeah. Yeah. You think I did all right? I think you did dope. That was dope. Yeah, you did good. I think starting with your story, I think it, segued in. It was perfect, right? Because you talked about your story, but then you interwove into that the work that you're doing, and then how that transitioned into how you're serving communities today. So I think it's powerful, man. And the hope with that last question, right, is